Hello everyone, welcome to this channel and welcome to this video where we will be taking a gentle introduction to building your own chatbot with Rasa open source. In this video, we will be spinning up our first chatbot with the help of Rasa open source, and with that understand the basics to then in future videos build more powerful chatbots or conversational assistants. But what is Rasa? Rasa is an open source framework specifically designed for building conversational AI applications. It provides a comprehensive set of tools, libraries, and development resources to create chatbots and virtual assistants. With Rasa, developers have the flexibility to design the conversational flow according to specific requirements that they might need. And there are two types of Rasa: Rasa open source and Rasa X or enterprise. And the one that we will be using here today is Rasa Open Source, which is an open source conversational AI platform that enables users to build chatbots and virtual assistants capable of understanding and holding conversations with users. Rasa Open Source provides tools for NLP and natural language understanding, NLU, and dialogue management. And developers like us can create contextual assistants on different messaging channels, whether it's Facebook or WhatsApp, and even integrated with third-party systems through a set of APIs. Rasa Open Source has several key features. First, it includes a natural language understanding or NLU capability. Rasa NLU helps the platform to understand user messages and extract relevant information to determine user intents or entities, and more on that later. Secondly, it has a dialogue management functionality, where Rasa handles conversations with users and makes decisions based on previous interactions, guiding the flow of the conversation. Additionally, Rasa Open Source supports connecting with various messaging channels, just as we said, such as Facebook Messenger, Slack, Telegram, and WhatsApp. So let's get started and set up the environment. In this project, I will be personally using PyCharm as my Python editor, and I will be creating a new project for this Rasa project specifically, and I'm naming it Rasa project. And throughout the process of creating a new project in PyCharm, we must enable the virtual environment. And then we will open up the terminal. And when we open it up, we should see in between brackets venv. And that means that the virtual environment has been activated. And then through writing pip install Rasa, we will be installing Rasa onto our virtual environment into our project. And this will take some time because we will be installing a lot of libraries within Rasa. After the installation is complete, we can check that everything's okay through just typing in Rasa -- version. And we will get this. And this indicates that everything's okay. Now, to spin up our first chatbot using Rasa open source, there are two commands that we can use. It's either the Rasa init command or the Rasa init -- no -prompt command. So what's the difference between those two commands, and which one will we be using in our introductory video to conversational assistants and Rasa open source? So when we run the first command, which is run Rasa init, it initializes a new Rasa project by setting up a directory structure and creating the necessary files for your own chatbot. And by default, it will do so through prompting you with a series of questions to configure your project. And these questions include the project name and whether to include their example training data or not, which NLU pipeline you'd like to use, and other configuration options. And this is an interactive prompt which allows you to customize the setup of the project based on your requirements. And the other command, which is the rasa init dash dash no prompt, is a command that skips that interactive prompt and uses the default settings for the project initialization. And it sets up the project with predefined configurations. It includes the example training data that comes from Rasa, and also selects your NLU pipeline. This option is useful if you want a quick way to get started without going through that interactive configuration process. However, if you choose this option, then you will need to modify the generated files and configurations manually if you'd like to customize the chatbot later on. In this video, we will be using the Rasa init no prompt method just to get an idea on how RAS builds their own chatbots and what is built when we call in this command. So we'll go for the default option, the one that is with no prompts and with everything pre-configured. So let's open up our Python editor, and I'll open my Python editor back up, and let's get back to coding. So let's create a new directory within our project and call it our first chatbot. And in it, we will spin up our demo chatbot. So after creating the new directory, let's cd into that directory through cd first chatbot, and then just type that command that we talked about a few moments ago, which is rasa init no prompt. And it'll take some time to train that model with demo data from Rasa and the actions from Rasa, or responses in this case. And after it's done training, we can converse with the chatbot. Now that the training's done, we can see that there is a model that has been generated for our chatbot specifically. But first, let's try to converse with our chatbot using the Rasa shell command. And as we wait for the Rasa shell command to load the chatbot that has been trained, we can see that when we click on the first chatbot directory, a lot of directories appear. And to see what the chatbot has been specifically trained on to converse on, we can open the data directory and look at the nlu.yml file. And we can see that there are multiple intents and different examples for different intents. So we can go ahead and greet our chatbot. And we can see that it can greet us back, and we can converse with it with using the nlu.yml as reference, because our chatbot only knows what we've trained it on. Okay? Now that we've spun up our chatbot and conversed with it while referencing the nlu.yml for examples on what the chatbot can recognize, let's take a look at the project structure of the chatbot that we've spun up using the help of Rasa open source, the Rasa init no prompt command. As we can see that there are multiple directories in our project, and we will go through each one of them individually, but I will be starting with the training data directory, or the data directory first. We can see that we have three main files: the nlu.yml, the rules.yml, and the stories.yml. And we can also see that the other folders are in the .yml format, which is the YAML format. And Rasa uses YAML as a unified and extendable way to manage all training data. And these three files represent three keys that correspond with training data. And there's a fourth additional key that we will also look at while exploring each key individually. And these three keys, which is the NLU, the rules, the stories, and the fourth key, which is the version, can all be mentioned once in one file. And here, the way that the training data or the example training data that the Rasa init no prompt command has provided for our chatbot is separated into 3 separate files, each concerning a specific type of training data key or requirement. And when we look at the first folder, which is the nlu.yml, we can see that there's the version key over here. And it's important to specify the version, as if we don't, Rasa will assume that we are using the latest training data format specified and supported by the Rasa version currently installed in our PC or workstation. And in this case, the Rasa init no prompt supports the 3.1 training data format. And so when we open any folder, we will see that this is being declared and specified. So let's start looking at our 3 remaining keys or 3 important requirements to train our model for using Rasa open source. The first one is the NLU, or the natural language understanding. NLU, which is short for natural language understanding, is the training data that we feed to the model for it to understand the intents behind different user statements. So how can we teach the chatbot to recognize that the statement that the user uttered, or the utterance that this chatbot received, is an intent? And why is that important? Well, we take this for granted when we have regular conversations. To understand what is appropriate, or to say what is the appropriate response, we need to understand the input that we're receiving, right? And it's the same thing for the chatbot. For the chatbot to respond to a greeting with a greeting back, it would need to understand the input coming in. And that's exactly what the NLU folder here, the NLU file, is trying to do. It's predicting different user inputs and classifying them into different intents. And we're training the model to recognize these intents because based on a specific intent, we have matched up a specific response. So if the chatbot receives the greeting, and those greetings can either be hey, hello, hi, hello there, good morning, good evening, it would recognize that intent as a greet and then potentially respond with a greeting back. And that's exactly what this folder does. We specify different types of user statements, and then we've classified them as a certain intent. Now, the second training data that we need to feed in to our model is these stories. And stories are essentially, as we can see, we specified the version over here as well. The story is a key in the training data that we need to provide for the model to be trained upon. And here we specify, or we predict, different types of conversation paths or scenarios that might happen while the chatbot is, chatting away with the user. So since this chatbot is very simple, it asks the user how was their day. And the based on this one question, there are multiple paths that the user can take the conversation to. They might be having a good day, so that's one scenario. And then they might have a bad day, and that's another scenario. And this is essentially what is happening over here. We're specifying the story, and stories can contain story name, which is an arbitrary name, and it is used as a human readable reference for the story or scenario. And here we have the happy path, and then we have the steps. And the steps is the the way the conversation flow or scenario would go about. So the user would utter a greeting, and the chatbot would, infer that the intent behind that statement is a greet, and therefore the action that the chatbot must perform is to utter a greeting back. And we will take a look at where we can find those actions later on in this video. Then, let's say the user sends a statement into the input of the chatbot, and the chatbot interprets the intent as they're in a good mood. So maybe they said perfect, I'm doing perfect. And so then the chatbot interprets that intent as mood underscore great. And then the chatbot would need to respond back, and the action it would do, it would utter a response to that positive feedback that it got from the user. Now, the third training data that I would like to like also talk about here is the version, or sorry, the rules.yml. And we can see that we've also specified the same version. In the rules, it's essentially the same as story in terms of its structure and how we write it. And it's essentially describes small pieces of conversations that always should follow the same rule. So whenever the user would say hi, for example, a rule that we would like to enforce our chatbot to abide by is always to say hi back. And whenever the user here, for example, says goodbye and we interpret a goodbye, then it should always utter a goodbye back. So that's essentially what rules are, and they're used to train the rule policy of our chatbot. And the rule policy is a policy that handles conversations that follows a fixed behavior. Okay, great. We provided training examples for different intents, and we've created different scenarios or stories for different paths of conversations a user can take. But where are those actions that we've seen or responses actually stored? How does the, chatbot respond back to whatever it interprets from the user as intents? And responses are typically found in the domain.yml folder. And we can see that we've defined the version and the different intents, and we've defined responses. So we are going to use the responses key, and we're going to define different responses and what that response is. So if we look back to our stories, we can see that in the happy path, we've interpreted a user's statement as a greeting. And so the action it will take after interpreting it as a greeting is to utter greet. So when we go to utter greet, we can see that the text is fixed and it's, hey, how are you? And if we look at the sad path, we can see that after uttering a greeting and the chatbot interprets the mood of the user to be unhappy from the input it received to that greeting, we would need to do this action, which is utter underscore cheer underscore up. And we can see we have this going on. This is the response that we might, receive if we had a bad day. But there's a folder over here called actions. So why are we putting our responses in the domain.yml and not the actions? What's the difference between this folder and the actions.py? The domain.yml is for responses. It's for when you would want to store the chatbot's responses to different, intents. So typically the actions specified here are the responses, and this is the most common action you will use. However, actions refer to custom actions, and custom actions, according to Rasa's open source documentation, is an action that can run any code you want. This can be used to make an API call or even query a database. So now that we've taken a look at the data folder and the actions folder, and we took a look at the domain.yml folder, let's take a look at the config.yml. What is the config.yml? The config.yml is a file that contains the configuration settings for our chatbot, and that includes the specification of the pipeline for NLU, the policies for dialogue management, and other training settings. What about the credentials.yml? What is it? And it's the file used to configure the credentials for any external services or APIs that the chatbot might need to interact with, such as database APIs, or if, for example, you want to integrate your chatbot with WhatsApp. So you can see for Facebook, there are these types of credentials that you would need to, specify. And finally, the endpoints.yml. Here we specify the endpoints for our chatbot, and they are used for the custom actions that we specify in the actions folder over here, and any external services that the chatbot might need to connect to complete a specific action. Now, the last directory that we will be talking about is the tests directory. And here is where we can take a look at how our chatbot is performing. And here we can specify different stories that are used to test the performance of chatbots in certain situations. And they're written in a modified story format. It allows, you to provide entire conversations, even specifying different user inputs just to see how the chatbot or the model that we trained will behave in different scenarios. Congratulations! You've built your first chatbot using Rasa open source, and you've understood the essentials and the requirements to build your own chatbot. In the next videos, we will be exploring Rasa open source framework a bit more and building more complex chatbots with the knowledge that we've acquired in this introductory video. So stay tuned for those videos, and as always, thank you for watching.